Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is saints of all religions. What a topic. I think this is the most important topic we've ever gotten into, in my opinion, in all these more than 400 videos we've made. Because I think the saints are the greatest people in history, the most important people. And we live in a low age, I think. But that's why a lot of people don't believe in God or believe that saints exist. Now, there are two different definitions of saints that I'm aware of. The first comes from the Christian Catholic Church, and they believe or get information about an individual who they think, oh, this guy's a saint, and so they investigate and there have to be miracles associated with an individual person, and then they make a decision and they just say, well, this is a saint. I respect that. That's their belief. Now, another definition of a saint is a person who has union with God, a person who is perfect, and who has fought the battle of evil and eliminated evil in their life, and so these are just amazing people, and they prove the existence of God. You know, so many. I think one of the reasons we have so many atheists today is that religious leaders many of them have not been, really good examples. So people think, oh, they don't, or have bad experiences, and there haven't been enough saints. I don't know if I've ever met a saint, but I think they're the real heroes in the world. Everyone loves heroes, people they look up to, and in today's world, we have their heroes the heroes many people have are in professional sports and in movie stars, musicians, and in various other fields, military conquerors, political leaders, scientists, artists, painters, and so various fields of endeavor, and those are all important. They have important roles to play. These different fields that people pursue. But I think the greatest heroes in the world today and in history are the saints. And in my church, my belief is based on the teachings from my church, Self-Realization Fellowship. And if you look behind me on the far left, there's a photograph of Paramahansa Yogananda, who founded Self-Realization Fellowship, and who's the leader and who's the most important person in my life since 1984. Life is hard, and there's all kinds of trouble comes at us in different forms: health trouble and problems in relationships and financial problems and so forth, various problems, and it's a real tragic. There's a lot of tragedy in life, and I've had depression, and there's a lot of misery. But anyway. My association with Paramahansa Yogananda has helped me so much to be happy and to be productive, and to help me to really start following my spiritual path. So I think, and from my belief, is that a saint is a person who has actually established a relationship with another saint, or someone who has become a saint, and followed the teachings and how to live, and practiced and prayer. Prayer is important. Service work, and also we believe yoga meditation too, because very often people go to church, and they're restless and maybe not their mind's on a million things, and they're not focusing on God. And yoga meditation helps us to develop the concentration needed to focus on God. And to me, the great reality of life is the fact that God exists. In our church, we believe that you can call God different names. Some people call him God, others the Creator, and Alcoholics Anonymous, they call God the higher power. And Christianity often is called God Heavenly Father. The name that I prefer is Divine Mother. And I think that's very appealing to me. So that's what I call God, Divine Mother. And I think the great reality of life is that Divine Mother created us and loves us and is a just God. God is a God of love and justice. And the thing is, people don't believe in reincarnation, but I think if they did, that would help. Because very often people look at life and they say, oh, look at this, this guy was born, and people are born in terrible families, and they think, oh, this is horrible. Why did this? And their whole lives are pretty terrible, maybe terrible because of that. Very abusive father, maybe, or whatever. Horrible poverty. And we believe now. Actually, in the West, not many people so many more now, but not so many people in the West have believed in reincarnation. In the East, it's actually a very popular belief among Hindus and Buddhists. And people say, well, why don't I remember my past lives? And the thing is, they say, we're taught that if you knew your past lives, you'd be depressed, overwhelmed by all the mistakes that we've made. And if you study history, I'm a historian, history is pretty depressing, all the horrible things people have done to each other. And but with reincarnation, so actually the fact that we don't know our past lives, that's actually good and really necessary so that we can, be successful and not be overwhelmed by, even in this life, people are often overwhelmed by bad memories. That's kind of really makes it hard for them to live their lives. Bad memories from childhood or early parts of their life. So anyway, with the fact that we don't remember past lives, I think is a good thing. But if you accept the idea that we have lived before, we've lived many lives, and then you think, well, this is why things have happened. I have a good friend, Brent Lessheim. We do videos with him. Brent Lessheim, Renaissance man. He's had horrific depression, and I know he hasn't done enough to bad things to deserve it. But he's come to believe, and I believe that, in past lives, he misbehaved. And I know myself also. I've had, I'm sure in the past, I've also misbehaved, and that's part of one of the struggles I've had in life because of my bad karma. But anyway, so God has to be a God of justice. And since people often in the West don't believe in reincarnation, they say, oh, how can you believe? They believe God is unjust because bad things happen to good people. And I think, well, this is terrible. So if God is an unjust God, then what kind of a God is he? And he's no good. But he has to be a God of justice. Okay, so that's important. And then but aside from that, actually more important than that is that he's a God of love. And so divine, you think of a mother, loving mothers. That's why I like to call God Divine Mother. Because and I think the great reality, if you look at life and all the things that happen. Things that can, all these different things, health troubles. People die. When I was a boy, my older sister died. Devastating, horrible for my poor parents. And, you can, these health troubles, all of a sudden, you can't work. And no money coming in. And then, or relationship troubles, all kinds of things that can happen. And then people are in political trouble, like what happened like in Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union. So to me, the thing is, the great reality of life is that Divine Mother loves us and wants us, and if you love someone, you want them to be happy. So to me, that's the great reality of life, and that means everything's okay. All these other things, okay, it's okay, because we're loved. And the thing is, we have to make spiritual effort, and the saints made that effort, because most of us, we live in a world where people just don't seem to be willing to make that much spiritual effort. I look at my own life. My only regret in life, I've been in self-realization fellowship since 1984, and my only regret in life is not making more effort in meditation, because yoga meditation it's work, and we have our problems in our character we have to overcome. So anyway, but there's no point in having regrets in life. What's important is now. And, the saints can inspire us. Like if you want to be an NBA player, LeBron James can inspire you. And the saints can inspire us today to live good lives and to live spiritual lives and to make spiritual progress toward union with God. There's an expression, they say, don't try to be a saint, which is very unfortunate, but it's, I think, typical of this low age we're living in because we all we all should try to become saints because that's the purpose of life, and we believe, Divine Mother exists. We were created by God, and God loves us. Divine Mother wants us to be happy, and she said, okay, I created this world for you. Go ahead and I want you to enjoy it, but don't forget about me. And so people today are, pretty much not thinking about God much at all, and then they wonder why there's so much trouble. And my guru and our guru in SRF, Paramahansa Yogananda, his picture up there. The saints they're one with God, and God knows everything. God's omnipresent everywhere, and the saints have those same qualities. So, and he was talking with God one time and arguing about human suffering. He's like, because if you look at the world, there's so much such suffering, and Divine Mother said they don't have to suffer. I thought that was one of the most wonderful things. But as long as people are not willing to make spiritual effort, then what can they do? And the thing about God, God created us, but God is shy, doesn't want to impose himself on us or herself, and likes to help us without our knowing about it. So God is not like really pushy and saying, I am God and you have to. So no, it's although if you make an effort, you can see it's subtle, the beauty in nature, and there's good in the world, and there's also evil, and there's good and evil, God and Satan, and we have to fight that battle and overcome and win the battle of good against evil. So anyway, so some of the saints, I put together a list here, did some research, and obviously, and I think I have 38 names here, and I think these people are, I'm sure some of them definitely are saints. In other words, they really were perfect people. They had union with God, and the saints, I think, have a great role to play because they're a positive force. They've become good. Like they say, you read about some of these famous people. They have tremendous achievements, which is wonderful. But then in their own personal lives or their own character, they have problems. So you think, well, that's not good. We have to become good people, and we have to keep changing for the better and overcome things like anger and selfishness and greed and so forth, and become kind and brave and patient and humble and so forth. And then if we achieve union with God, which many people don't even believe in that, like all they think of is wealth and fame and worldly things, then we can be supremely happy. The saints, very often they have union with God, but they don't advertise it because that's not God. Again, that's not God's way to force himself on us. He wants us. God loves us, but wants us to love him. Or Divine Mother wants us to love her, and we'll only be happy if we do. And so we have to be patient. Things take time. People, practice meditation. They're impatient. They want, I want samadhi bliss, union with God, this tremendous joy. But it takes time. And the restless mind we're so used to being restless that we go to meditate and our mind's wandering and we're not really meditating. Okay, so let's talk about some of these saints in the list that I put together. Now, in our church, we believe that India and Tibet are the great holy land, and India is really the land of saints. So the first saint I have here is Kabir, who lived in the 15th century, and they say that the Lord was his music teacher. And he was, a great musician. He apparently wandered around India, and he would just sing about God. And you see, and inspired people, and he would go from place to place. And music actually is a wonderful way. It can play an important role on the spiritual path to develop devotion and to get our minds thinking about God. And in the some wonderful Christian hymns, that really help people to have devotion, think about God. In our church, we call them chants. They're an important part of our spiritual path. And so Kabir, a great musician actually, who used music to help people spiritually. Okay, Lahiri Mahashaya, who was from India, born in 1828, died in 1895. We revere him as a Param Guru in Self-Realization Fellowship. We have our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, whose picture is up there on the left. His Guru was Sri Yukteswar, and his Guru was Lahiri Mahashaya, because you have to have, if you want to become liberated, you want to have union with God, you have to follow someone who's achieved that. And so, anyway, Lahiri Mahashaya is a part of Self-Realization Fellowship. We revere him, and he's in our altar as the guru of our guru's guru. Mahavatar Babaji was his guru, and again, he's lived in India. I believe we're taught that he's still alive in the Himalaya mountains. And that there's no knowledge of his birth and death information. That I believe he's still alive, and tremendous saint of India, Mahavatar Babaji, whom we revere also. He's also part of our altar pictures. Paramahansa Yogananda was born in 1893, I believe, and died in 1952. And he came to India in 1920. he was from India, came to the United States in 1920 and established Self-Realization Fellowship, which is this amazing organization and a tremendously powerful force in the world, helping people to change. The problem with the world today is human character, and there won't be a we tend to think of political solutions. There won't be a political solution. These communist revolutions who purported to have a political solution to the human ills were massive failures. No, we have to change, and you only can change yourself, and we want to change the world. If you change yourself, then that's the main thing, and that itself is extremely significant. Because very often people are trying to change the world, and they themselves are, angry or whatever, being problematic in their character. So SRF helps people to change, and all over the world, people, I think, more than 1 million in most countries in the world, you have SRF members here in the United States, and here he came to the West. There was a group I was in the Philippines, the Manila Meditation Circle. I was in Zurich, Switzerland, had an SRF group all over in Europe, South America, Africa, Asia, and so forth. So SRF. So Paramahansa Yogananda. Yeah, he's my guy. He's the greatest, most important person in my life, and he provided all the lessons. He died in 1952, but he left all these lessons. And we believe that since the saints, you can pray to God, and you can pray to individual saints, and he is a saint, and he's my guru, which is the person who is helping the person to evolve, to improve themselves, to change for the better, and to learn how to live and achieve God union. And so he's teaching me and many, many others how to do that. And just he has all these books and then the lessons and so forth, a tremendous, an amazing amount of wisdom available for people if they're willing to, like they say, God sends saints to the world because he loves us, and the saints are here to help us. But so often the world doesn't want to be helped. People, ignore the saints. So anyway, SRF is a wonderful opportunity today. And Paramahansa Yogananda, tremendous saint in today's world, even though he died, but his presence is very, very powerful. His guru, Sri Yukteswar, born in 1855 to 1936. Paramahansa Yogananda went back to India, and because he wanted to see his guru one last time before he died. So he was devoted to Sri Yukteswar, and they called him the Lion of Bengal. And there was and he's in our altar. We have 6 pictures in our altar. These our guru, and then his three predecessors, the 3 gurus before him, along with Jesus Christ and Bhagavan Krishna. Okay, the next is Lord Krishna, one of my favorite saints, and we don't know much about his, in terms of his birth and death, because apparently he lived about 4,000 BC. I'm not sure about that, and there's nothing in Wikipedia. But anyway, there are a lot of wonderful stories about Krishna, who was a saint in ancient India, and he was a king. And to me, that's amazing. A king and a saint. What could be better? So he was a political leader, and you couldn't have a better king than a king who's a saint. Lord Bhagavan Krishna, Lord Krishna. A lot of good stories. One of the stories, he had he lived his life, and as a child, he had a friend, and he had friends growing up. His whole life he had friends. And one of his friends, as an adult, was having hard times and was married, had kids. So there was no money, no food. And his wife said, why don't you go see Krishna? Because he was the king, and he thought, he can help us. So the guy said, okay, fine. So he traveled like 3 days walking to the palace. And Krishna was very happy. Oh, wonderful. So happy to see his friend. And so they visited. And then the guy talked and had a good reunion. And the guy started going home. And when he was about halfway home, he thought, oh, I forgot to ask Krishna for help, because he needed help financially. Because they were, and he said, oh, it's too late. And he was kind of depressed. He thought, oh, I'll just go home. And he went home, and his home was gone. He thought, oh my God, what's going on? And instead of, they were just living in this little tiny shack, and instead there was like a big, huge mansion. And he knocked. He said, "Oh boy, I wonder where my wife and kids are." So he knocked on the door, and wonder what happened. And the door opened. This woman came, dressed in very, very well, real nice clothing. And he goes, "Well, I'm looking for my wife and kids. And I don't know what happened to our home. It used to be here." And his wife says, "Oh, honey, don't you recognize me?" It was his wife. And so Krishna did help him. And the thing is, this is a very touching thing, that God helps us all the time. And he knows that we, very often people are praying for different things, a lot of financial problems, and God God knows our problems. He knows everything, so He will help us. And in this case, yeah, this guy, his financial problems were solved, and he didn't have to actually ask for it, but they were. So that's a beautiful story. Another story: there was a woman who was a hunchback, and there was this evil guy who came into town, and she sold perfume, or she supplied perfume to Lord Krishna. And one day, this bad guy came into town, really starting a war, and she was on her way to Krishna to bring the perfume, and he said, "No, sell it to me." And she didn't know what to do, and so she finally she said, I think she said no. I can't remember the story, but anyway, she had this test. And then later, Krishna touched her chin, and she straightened her body out. So that's another story. All kinds of wonderful stories about Krishna. Okay, Lord Buddha, who lived about 500 BC. Yeah, but there are a lot of wonderful stories about Buddha, who was a prince, Siddhartha Gautama, from India, a prince in India. And then as a young man, he learned about, he became very troubled about some of the realities of life, like poverty and sickness and old age and death. He thought, oh my God, his father tried to protect him from all that. So he vowed to solve the mystery of life, and he left. And he was married. He had a wife and a young child, and he left. And excuse me. So this young prince, Siddhartha Gautama, he left his wife and child, and he was supposed to be the next king, and he went off alone. And according to the story, he went under this tree, a banyan tree, I believe, and he said, "I'm not going to leave this spot until I find God and solve union with God." And supposedly it took him 8 years. He was sitting there, and eventually, must have been practicing meditation, and he became liberated. He achieved union with God. They say what he did was very, very hard. I don't know if he had any meditation techniques, but he stuck it out. And apparently, before liberation, these demons and dancing girls appeared to try to tempt him. The demons to scare him, the dancing girls to tempt him through sexual pleasure. And he overcame it. So anyway, Buddha, so he became liberated, and then he came home, and it's kind of sad. His wife and this child, I think the child was a year old. By then he must have been 9. But anyway, he came back, and his wife and his child, and then he had these. He started traveling around India, and I think and as a result of his life, China adopted what was called Buddhism. China, Southeast Asia, and Japan, and I think his effect was to strengthen Hinduism in India. India was already a very spiritual country, but since we're living in a low age, there were problems in all religions because of the low age we're living in. So Buddhism, I think he strengthened Hinduism in India. Lord Buddha, yeah, wonderful. And his he really taught people to be kind and peaceful, and also to respect animals. Yeah, that's another thing that he did. So Buddhism, Lord Buddha, one of the great saints in history. Muhammad, born in 570, died in 632. Now, Muhammad's a very interesting character, and I would say that he was a saint. And some would argue, of course, Muslims believe he's the saint, or the great, they call him the prophet. But he established Islam in Arabia in the 600s. And now some people, now the thing about Muhammad is that he was a spiritual leader and a military leader and a political leader. And as Islam spread through war. And so some people say, well, how could he be a saint? What's this? What's going on? And, my opinion is that, for example, Jesus Christ, Christianity spread within the Roman Empire. And so if you have an empire, then you have order, law and order, and so forth. So Christianity could spread within the empire. Now, in Muhammad's case, Arabia and it really spread early on in Arabia and North Africa. Arabia and North Africa didn't have, and this was after the fall of the Roman Empire, Arabia and North Africa had very small kingdoms. So Islam could not spread. In other words, he actually had to create an empire for Islam to spread, whereas Christianity had the Roman Empire to spread in. And so he had to be a military leader and a political leader for Islam to spread. And I think, the teaching, so that's just where you have, the violence associated with Islam. And then, because he was a military leader and a political leader. That's interesting. Excuse me. So Islam, but if you look at the teachings of Islam, he did teach compassion and kindness and charity, and to help the poor and so forth. So there's a lot of things that you could say are very spiritual in Islam. Now in today's world, you have those who are practicing what they call Islamic jihad, really living in warfare against the West, and you could say I think they actually are following the early years of, or really the way Islam spread through warfare. But I would say in today's world, it's completely unnecessary. And if Muslims want Islam to spread, then they should use persuasion. There's no need for violence today. Unlike in Muhammad's lifetime, yes, he really had to create an empire. Didn't exist. There's no way Islam could have spread if not for warfare. So in today's world, there's no need for Islam to have a violent component. That they should also, they want to go out and talk to people and so forth. And I think in our church, we believe in being a good example more than anything. But and many other Christian, there are Christian missionaries who go out and they try to convert people to their version of Christianity, and Muslims can do the same thing. But this whole idea of in today's world, for Islam to have a violent aspect, this I think is completely unnecessary and wrong, because the conditions are different. You have established countries, where there's law and order is established. So if they want Islam to spread, then they should use persuasion. Okay, Akbar, he was a Muslim king in India, and from 1542 to 1605, during the time when Muslims ruled India, the Mughal Empire, which was I think it was related to the Turks. But anyway, he was Muslim, and although he had he was a king, but he had very interesting. I have a biography of him. I'm interested in buying. He had Hindu and Muslim followers, and they said that after he died, his followers were arguing over, India's had problems between Hindus and Muslims, and they were arguing over how to bury him. And so because the Hindus wanted Hindu rights, the Muslims Muslim rights, so he apparently woke up and said, okay, divide, have me cremated and take half the ashes for Hindu rights and half for Muslim rights. But then, and then he went back and closed his eyes and laid down. And then after that, according to the story, he turned into a bouquet of flowers, and then they divided the flowers for the rights for the two religions. Jesus Christ, yes, of course, he's a real famous saint and very influential, an incredible life, wonderful life. And a lot of people are, I think there's a fair number of people who are anti-Christian, again, because of the low age we've been living in, and a problem with Christian leaders who have not. The problem with Christianity is it hasn't been Christian very often, again, because we're living in a low age, I believe. But the message is still right, to love God and love each other. And especially when he was being crucified, when he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And, forgiveness is so important, because otherwise, this world will be, the fighting will never end, if people won't forgive. That's one of the, in our own lives, we've all been wrong, we've hurt others, and we've been hurt, and then if we don't forgive, we can't get along with people. We have to forgive people. And I think, and sometimes it's hard, but the thing is, to pray for people, and I think that helps us. If we pray for people who have hurt us, that can help us, to forgive. And so Jesus Christ, a wonderful message that we should love God and love each other. And like they say, Christianity was the greatest civilizing force in history, because we live in kind of a cruel world. St. Augustine, year 354 to 430, North Africa. Yeah, he was an early Christian saint. They have the Augustinian order in the Catholic Church. St. Augustine. Don't know much about him. I believe I have a biography of him. here I haven't read yet. He came from a wealthy family in North Africa. Pretty interesting. Saint Francis of Assisi, born in 1181 to 1226 in Assisi, Italy. Yeah, he's one of the wonderful saint, Saint Francis. Yeah, and I think the current saint's named after him. Yeah, the story. He came from a rich family, and then he was I think giving away the family's wealth, and his father got mad, and he was in court, and they told him, and he took off his father. He decided he took off all his clothes. He was wearing rich clothing from the family, and he says, you're not my father anymore. He says, my heavenly Father is my father, which was kind of hurtful for his father. But anyway, it was just showing that that's we should really, we are influenced by different people. But we should really follow what God wants, or try to do what we think God wants, rather. Because if some people want us to do the wrong thing, we should, even if it's our father or mother or whoever it is, we need to do what's right. And that's what he did. We lived a wonderful life, yeah. And he really, Christianity was struggling during his time because of, again, the low age we've been in, and misbehavior by priests and bishops and cardinals and popes. But he, was a very good, he was a saint, Saint Francis. And there's stories of, the birds coming and perching on his shoulders. And yeah, he's a really historical, I would say he is a saint and very, very beloved. Joan of Arc. From 1412 to 1431. She was a girl, she didn't even live to be 20. She died when she was 19. And a military leader. She led troops to fight the English in France. She's like a great saint for France because she fought the English who had conquered France, and she helped lead independence, or French independence, you could say. Saint Joan of Arc. Wow, wonderful story, yeah. And she was, and again, she had conflict with the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, really, because the Protestant churches hadn't come yet. And Christian Church, yeah, and I think she was executed. Was it burned at the stake? Because she was kind of a threat to them. The saints often get in trouble against religious leaders because often religious leaders aren't really very good. And the saints are kind of a threat to their power. So she was one of the most amazing saints, because here she's a military leader. It just shows you sometimes the war is right. We have to have courage. Sometimes people who talk about peace are just giving into fear. We have to have courage. Joan of Arc, what an amazing story of her life. Maximilian Kolbe, 1894 to 1941. He was a Polish Catholic priest who was killed by the Germans, Nazi Germany, in the Second World War, and because they were really an atheistic government and terrible government, and he stood up to them and died as a result. Saint Teresa of Avila in Spain, around in the 1500s, she wrote this book called The Interior Castle. A castle is something that it's like where people used to build, as protection against big walls, and you have the moat and so forth, and as protection against attack. And of course, and she's talking about the interior castle, which is the real protection against harm, against evil, which is through the spiritual life, the being close to God. Saint Teresa of Avila. I have a book about her I have never read. I really should. Okay, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who was 1910 to 1997, born in Albania in the Balkan Peninsula, and spent most of her life in India, working and did this really incredibly noble life. Lived this incredibly noble life and serving the poorest of the poor in India. Yeah, you have these people and all these with India in India. You had a huge population and severe material poverty, and she was taking these poor people who were living their lives and dying on the streets. Poor, terrible, and really hard. And so wonderful. Kind of ironic because you have India's great great land of saints, and here she was from Europe and a Christian in India, so kind of very interesting. And she was very beloved, and she told a story about, one of the stories about her is that she traveled a lot. She was on an airplane, and then she was going to the bathroom different times. So she was wondering what she was doing, and turns out she was cleaning the bathrooms, and then she did this because she was famous, world known, and she was worried about developing pride which is the downfall of great, has been a downfall of great people. They do great things, and then they fall, and because of pride. And so she was doing this to cleaning the bathrooms on the airplane to develop humility. An incredibly, very inspiring life, and in our times, So you can see videos of her. Saint Therese of Lisieux, 1873 to 1897 in France. They called her the Little Flower. She didn't live very long. I believe there's an order, a Catholic order of nuns. And in the Philippines, my wife Alice and I stayed in Baguio at the Little Flower Convent. And she didn't live very long, less than 20 some years. But she died. She got sick, and apparently she must have impressed people, and prayerful people apparently have been praying to her and have been helped. So very, very interesting. I'd like to learn more about her. I think I read a biography of her. Thomas Aquinas in the 1200s in Italy. Yeah, he was, I believe, an educator. A lot of these Christian leaders have been educators. Education is an important service. And I know there's an Aquinas school in various places. I know it not far from our home in San Juan, Metro Manila, Philippines. Padre Pio, who lived in Italy, 1887 to 1968. I really like him. He's pretty cool. I know there's a story. There was one story where a young man came to him to talk. He was getting married, and he wanted to talk to Padre Pio. And Pio, since he was a saint, saints know everything, their union with God. And he got mad at the guy. He yelled at him. He says, "Go away." He says, "You know what you did. Don't come. You got to fix what you've done before you come back." And the guy knew exactly what he was talking about. This young man had gotten a woman pregnant and abandoned her, and he was marrying another woman. So he thought, I know what he's talking about. So he broke up. He broke the engagement off with his fiancée, and he found this woman that he gotten pregnant. And because he had just abandoned her, and then he brought her. I think he married her, and he brought her with him and the child. And Pio was completely very kind, and this is exactly what he wanted, because he wanted him to do the right thing. And there were stories about Pio. Yeah, Padre Pio. He would, you think of saints as being kind and peaceable, but yeah, he could let people have it when they were wrong, because we shouldn't support evil. And I know he would not, when women would come and wearing miniskirts to confession, he would not hear confession. He said, "This is wrong. You shouldn't be, because sex is a real problem, and miniskirts kind of promotes guys becoming having problems, maybe pursuing women for the wrong reason." So Padre Pio, I find him very inspiring. Wonderful guy. He told stories where he was wrestling with demons who attacked him. Okay, Noah. Now, Noah's in the Bible. Yeah, and he's, I think, considered a Catholic saint. Noah, of course, the famous story of Noah's Ark, right, where when there was all this wickedness, and really not the whole world, I think the Middle East, in a flood, and he took these animals and his family, and then there was when there was, I guess, a lot of bad karma, so there was a flood. A lot of people died. Abraham, really the founder of the Israeli people in 2000 BC, and God spoke to him, and he traveled from what's now Iraq over toward what's now Israel. Moses, who led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, and there are miracles associated with saints, and of course the great miracle when excuse me, and the Red Sea parted. The miracle was the Red Sea parted, which allowed the Israelites to escape from Egypt over to the Sinai Peninsula, and then because the Pharaoh changed his mind, and he was coming to get them, bring them back into slavery, and then when the Israelites made it across, then the waters came, and then the Egyptian soldiers all died. And then, of course, they were in the Sinai desert for a long time. You got the Ten Commandments there, although he died before they made it back to Israel. Elijah and Elisha. Now, these are two Old Testament prophets, and we believe in SRF that Elijah was a reincarnation of John the Baptist, and Elisha was Jesus Christ in a later incarnation. And then, and this is why Jesus paid respects to John the Baptist, because he had been his guru, and that's the right thing to do. The guru deserves respect, because you won't find anything one doing more for another person than what the guru does for his devotee. Okay, Jonah, the story of Jonah and the whale, 800 BC. That's an interesting story. Ezekiel, 600 BC. In our church here in Lakewood, Ohio, USA, St. Peter's Episcopal Church, there's all these stained glass windows, including a depiction of Ezekiel, and there's a raven, which are kind of like big crows, or at his there. And according to the story, I really like this story, that ravens brought him food. Yeah, that if you're a saint, or if you're trying to become a saint or trying to become liberated, you have union with God, you need to get away from the world, and fasting is part of it. But you also need to eat. And apparently these ravens, God sent ravens to bring food to him. I thought that was really nice. Saint Anthony of the Desert lived in Egypt in around 250 to 350. And Paramahansa Yogananda talked about Anthony of the Desert. I read a biography about him. Supposedly the story that he spent many years alone. This, I think, in North Africa. Yeah, and he was in a tomb, and he was praying and meditating, and he was a very spiritual fellow. But then close to liberation, close to him becoming a liberated soul, that there were these actually jackals appeared, and demons and so forth. And finally Satan appeared, and Satan said, "Now I will destroy you." That only evil force ruled the world, and the buildings, this tomb started shaking and cracking, and Saint Anthony cried to God for help, to Jesus, I think Jesus for help, and Jesus appeared, or I think, or God appeared. And then he said. Anthony said, and then everything was fine, right? And then Anthony said, "Where were you all this time?" And God said to him, "Anthony, I was with you all the same." And God is with us, even though we very often, we don't feel His presence. That's why people are often atheists. But God is with us, and and very often we'll see how His help has come. Again, because He's shy. God's shy and subtle. He wants to help us without our knowing it. Okay, Raymond Nonatus, my dear wife Alice, she prayed to him. He lived in Spain in the 1200s, and he's considered the patron saint of pregnant women, to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy delivery of a child. So remember, she was always praying this prayer to Saint Raymond Nonatus when she was pregnant with our son Tim. Lorenzo Ruiz, in the 1600s, from the Philippines. He went with the Spanish missionaries to Japan and died in Japan, because the Japanese decided they didn't go for these Christian missionaries. So he was executed in Japan. So Filipinos really revere him. Because he was the first, I think, Filipino Filipinos to become declared a saint by the Catholic Church, and Filipinos are very devout Catholics. Saint Peter, who was my namesake, Peter, who was the leader of Christianity after Jesus died, and Christian Church. And the thing that was so touching, when Jesus was arrested, and then they took him away, and then all the disciples were scared, and he was abandoned by them, and then only John came to the cross. John had the courage. Now, Peter didn't come. And later, when Jesus resurrected and came back and talked with his disciples, and Peter felt so terrible, so ashamed and guilty that he, in his hour of need, his guru, this saint who was helping him, and Jesus said, it's okay. He forgave him. Yeah, so this was this reconciliation. He said, "Don't feel bad. That's okay. It's okay. We all fail at different times," and that was Peter's failure. But he lived a very successful life after that, and then was crucified upside down. Our church, again, at St. Peter's here. There's a picture of him. This upside down cross, because when he was going to be crucified by the Romans. He said, "No, I don't want that, because that's only for Jesus." And so he insisted on being crucified upside down. And St. Peter's Basilica, which is the main Christian church, well, actually Roman Catholic church in Rome, is named after him. Mother Mary, for whom Catholic Christians are very devoted, and I think she was the mother of Jesus Christ, and I think that the appeal of her is really the fact that she was a mother, and in a way she represents Divine Mother, which again I find very appealing, Divine Mother, that we are loved by God, that we can think of God as Divine Mother. John, again, the only disciple one of the disciples of Jesus, the only one to appear at the cross, and this is why John became such a popular name. Like my father was John. A lot of people think, oh, it's a boring name. No, it's an amazing name. And when Jesus was, before he died, John was there. John had the courage to be there when his friend was dying. And Jesus said, John, will you please take care of my mother while I'm gone? And he did. Wonderful. John the Baptist, who was the you could say that, he was really the guru of Jesus in a and he was the master, but in Jesus' life, it was really, he was really the star, or the one with the mission, and John the Baptist was was an older guy, but he was his predecessor, and again, he is his teacher in a former life, or his guru. St. Paul, most of the New Testament is written by Paul, and I know some people didn't like some of the things he wrote about women. Well, I really don't know, but he became controversial. But he did a lot for the spread of early Christianity. St. Thomas, another one of the disciples of Jesus, who brought Christianity to India, even though India had, was a holy land. But again, since we're in a low age, kind of like the role that Lord Buddha played, sort of bringing spirituality to India. And again, kind of like St. Teresa, also, we're living in an international world, and so St. Thomas, the guy who didn't believe it, when they called him Doubting Thomas, who didn't believe that Jesus was back. St. James, another disciple of Jesus, who brought Christianity to Spain, and then there's in Spanish, Diego, San Diego, California, named after him. And in Spain, Santiago de Compostela, which is a major pilgrimage site where I believe he died in northwestern Spain, St. James. And finally, St. Patrick, who lived in the 500s, who I believe was kidnapped from England and brought to Ireland as a slave and eventually escaped, but came back to Ireland, and and of course today, St. Patrick's Day in all over the U.S. Here in Cleveland, it's a big Irish holiday. Unfortunately, there's a lot of drinking associated with it. But I remember my father used to say, St. Patrick, who drove the snakes out of Ireland. Apparently, Patrick, I read a little bit about him, and he met with these various kings, so-called pagan kings of Ireland, and had the courage, and he became, Ireland became Christian as a result, because when these various kings of different kingdoms in Ireland, when they decided to become Christian, then all the people did as well. Although, again, it was, not the really strong Christianity when somebody else decides for you. So the saints of all religions, what an amazing... this is a vast topic, and there's so many... And I have a strong interest in, reading... You can read biographies of Padre Pio and St. Teresa, or Mother Teresa, and St. Teresa of Lisieux, St. Teresa of Avila, and various other, like I said, Akbar. So these are the great, for me, in my opinion, the great heroes in history and in the world today, and shows that God does exist and God loves us, and they show the way. They show the way for us to follow, so that we can be free forever from suffering, from pain and suffering, and not reincarnate and have union with God and have this tremendous joy from God union. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.